Are we wrong about Yukong? Hey, my name is Gib, and Hoya recently revealed a nice pre-reveal of Yukong's skills, her talents, her techniques, all of that, and I wanted to do a nice little pre-analysis of Yukong, showcasing potential Yukong relics, her team comps, her builds, Lightcones, and how you're going to play around her. So let's get right into it. Okay. All right, starting with Yukong's kit here. Yukong's kit is actually pretty simple to understand. Starting with her traces here, her first trace is going to make it so she can resist a debuff one time. This can be triggered again after a certain number of turns. Don't know the turns yet. We will learn it tomorrow when she comes out. When she's on the field, imaginary damage dealt is going to be increased, kind of like Asta has the fire damage increase, which is pretty nice. And then her last thing is going to be an energy increase. We don't know how much this is, but depending on how this could be huge for burst uptime rotations, which would be really nice. And then obviously we have her trace upgrade materials and her character ascension materials. She's going to be using the Destroyer's weekly boss, and then obviously Harmony Mats and the Lafu enemies boss drop. And then this is like the lightning sanction, whatever, Witcher lady, unimportant. Then we have her basic attack. Basic attack's just, simple. Does imaginary damage to whoever she's aiming at. It's actually got a pretty nice animation, I like it. Then we have her skill. Her skill is going to be what's giving your team the attack buff. Now with the attack buff, she will not use up the attack buff on the cast, which is nice because if she did, you'd only have it for one turn. So this makes me wonder, and if you want to go first or if you want to go last, because she also has a technique which is very good as well. But you're probably going to try to get her to go first. And if you can't have her go first because your team is too fast, you probably go last so that you have it on second turn and you're guaranteed to have your DPS get it. Now we have her ultimate. Her ultimate is going to be what gives you the crit rate and crit damage to all of your allies. And if you do this, say you're running like a sub DPS Yukong, you could do your skill into ult and you will be able to actually get the buff from your skill onto your ultimate, giving you a big damage multiplier because this is single target and it's not AoE, so this will probably have a decent multiplier on it. Then we have her talent. Her talent is going to give you increased toughness break on the attack, extra shield break, to put it simple. And this resets after a set number of turns. It's probably going to be like 1 or 2 turns. I would guess 2 turns. I wouldn't say 3. 3 would be pretty long. Probably going to be a 2-turn reset. We'll see when she comes out. And then lastly, we have her technique. Makes you go fast as fuck, boy. This makes you go super speed, If you play Genshin Impact, this is kind of like Yelan. This is going to be huge. I'm so glad we're getting her for free because this is going to be so nice for open world exploration. This actually might make me want to farm the open world mobs a little bit more. And you're going to need to know where the technique points are so you can have this going up all the time. I think this also stays... Yeah, this stays for a very long time. It stays for 20 seconds, which is pretty huge. All right, now we dabble into the pros and cons of Yukong. She's going to be a pretty solid 4-star character, especially since we're going to get her for free. And she's going to be the first imaginary character that's not 5-star because, well, it's our only imaginary character until Locha comes out. All right, but starting with the pros here. Pro number 1 is going to be huge. I think her technique is going to be so fun running around the map very fast. I wish it was an infinite duration so you could just sprint around like Sonic, but it's 20 seconds. 20 seconds is pretty long. Then she does have a high toughness break, and it seems like it's going to be, it seems like an ability that'll have a very short cooldown if you do a little bit of dreaming. Anyways, we have our first crit rate buffer coming in because we don't have a crit rate buffer. We have a crit damage buffer, which is Bronya, but she's a 5-star, so this is going to be a nice, accessible crit rate and crit damage buffer, which would be nice. She also has huge sub DPS potential. Ting Yun can kind of sub DPS, but not really. Ting Yun has the basic attack, increased talent, but that's not enough to really warrant going a sub DPS. You just have the extra damage that you're going to do on your normal attacks when you have Benediction still available on your DPS. Then we also have the fact that you will be able to run mono imaginary with her Locha Welt. That's going to be probably very solid team comp has pretty much everything covered, and the enemy's just going to be perma-slow. They won't be able to attack. And lastly, with her being a Harmony character, she will be able to use Memories of Past with that extra break effect she gets from her talent. And then on top of that, she'll be able to use Meshing Cogs, which is really strong for gaining energy and getting some very nice ultimate uptime. Now, with every character's pros comes the cons. Now let's get into Yukong's cons here. She actually probably won't have that many cons except for her skill point efficiency, but we will see when she comes out. Currently, the biggest cons I'm seeing for Yukong is going to be her skill point efficiency. As I said, she's going to be a Harmony support, so she might have a lot of her potential locked behind Eidolons, like getting energy or maybe extra buffs given to allies or to herself for like that sub DPS potential. Her scalings could be low so that it limits her sub DPS potential. And you might need to go all the way up on her Ascension talents to have full potential on her, which means she will need a lot of investment. Before getting into Yukong's potential playstyles and Lightcones and Relics, I actually want to talk about her team synergy here. Now, obviously, until she actually comes out and she's tested with a bunch of characters and different team comps and all that, right now we're just going to be stuck with Mono Imaginary, which is going to be Yukong, Welt, Locha, and Subwolf, so you can do weakness break if the enemy doesn't have imaginary weakness on them. And then we're going to have your classic DPS buffer, sub DPS shielder with a healer, or maybe you go double DPS with a sub DPS buffer. Bunch of different teams you could run there. Something like this could work as like a free-to-play team comp example, and obviously we have our Mono Imaginary. Okay, before getting into Lightcones and Relics to finish off the video, I want to talk about her playstyles. Playstyles is pretty simple. She's going to have her sub DPS playstyle, and then if you want her to be full support, so you're not worried about her damage at all. When you're going sub DPS, you're going to be looking for crit stats and maybe some break effect to abuse her talent, where she gets the extra weakness, toughness break. But you would be going for crit stats, attack, stuff like that. And then if you're going for a full support, you're going to be going for tank stats like HP and defense to make sure she's staying alive, and definitely going to be going for energy recharge to make sure that she has that good ultimate uptime. Now, with sub DPS, you could also opt for a good ult uptime as well, and maybe you don't want to go for break effect rope and you also go for energy recharge rope on sub DPS. Could do that. We don't know until she comes out. But these are just some thoughts and some ideas to throw out there. And for the last section of this pre-release, pre-analysis of Yukong, going to be looking at potential Lightcones and Relics that would be very good on her. Her Lightcones are going to be pretty obvious options here, starting with Meshing Cogs. Meshing Cogs would be very good and get you that good ult uptime, giving you 8 energy every time you get hit once per turn, which would be really huge for getting nice ultimate uptime. Then we're going to have Memory of Past. Now, I'm not going to recommend Chorus because Meshing Cogs exists. On top of Meshing Cogs, going to 4 stars here, you have Memories of Past and the Planetary Rendezvous. Planetary Rendezvous obviously is only going to be for Mono Imaginary, because when you're doing Mono Imaginary, Planetary Rendezvous is going to be giving you the increased damage percent for people that are the same elemental type as you, and you're running Mono Imaginary, so everyone's going to be getting that buff in that team, which will be nice. And then we have Memories of Past, going to be giving you break effect for when you hit that talent, so you can do some increased slow onto the person, onto the enemy that you're fighting, giving some extra delay. And then you also get energy. You won't be getting as much energy as Meshing Cogs until you get some super impositions on it, but it is still a very good light cone. There's also Dance 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 and Carve the Moon. I personally am not going to recommend Dance 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 because you're not going to be ulting that often to get the most value out of it, and this could be used on a different Harmony support like Asta or something, who can utilize this very well since she ults a lot. And with Carve the Moon Battle Pass Tingyun Light Cone, do keep in mind it is RNG on what buff you will get, but all of the buffs are pretty good. However, the multipliers on it are pretty small until you get refinements, but if you're a Battle Pass buyer, you will be getting more refinements on it. Or I keep saying refinements because a Genshin player, but Genshin brain rot. But you know what I mean, super imposition. Now, regarding Bronya's Light Cone, I'm not going to recommend it because you would only be using it for a stat stick. You could use it as a stat stick if you wanted, but other Light Cone options would give you more value. You won't be able to use that passive that much since you won't be ulting that often. You would get the 10% energy regen, but you will not be getting the skill points that many times in battle, and you'd have to do some very hard speed tuning to make sure that your DPS is always getting that 30% more damage when Yukong is already giving you crit rate and attack buffs. So you can just play for her buffs instead of having to try to speed tune to play for your Lightcones buffs on top of that. So I would highly recommend just sticking with Meshing Cogs or Memories of the Past. Ending off Lightcones here, best Lightcones is going to be Memories of the Past or Meshing Cogs, and then Planetary Rendezvous is a very solid option if you are using a mono imaginary. And lastly, the relics for Yukong, very simple here. She's just going to be using a 4-piece musketeer, so you can get that extra normal attack for your talent when you're getting those break, and so you get the increased speed, that free extra speed stat, so you don't have to worry as much about speed tuning. You could also opt for a 2-piece musketeer with 2-piece imaginary if you're doing something like a sub DPS to get you some extra damage on that as well. And for planars, you're most likely going to be using Fleet of the Ageless for that free attack that you get once you hit that speed threshold, giving attack to all of your allies on your team, which is really nice, and you get the extra HP, so she's a little bit more beefy and she's not getting one-tapped, you know, by the enemies that you're fighting. And you could also be running a Von Walk potentially for that extra 5% ER and the extra action forward that you get at the start of the round when you hit the speed threshold on that. And with that, I wrap up the video. Hope you enjoyed this Yukong, little pre-analysis. We'll be having a guide for her around sometime when she comes out, day of, day after, potentially. I don't know. Hope you enjoy it. Make sure to like, make sure to sub, and see you in the future. Goodbye.